Mexico became the leading exporter of oil. It was also discovered in Venezuela, Peru, and Colombia. There was also mining of other resources, such as copper, tin, and bauxite in the areas of Chile, Peru, Bolivia, and Guyana. British and American companies basically monopolized the oil and mining operations. In addition to all of this, the 1920s saw a great expansion in the generalization of electric and hydraulic power. This caused an increase for industrialization in Latin America, but heavy industrialization would not come to Latin America until after World War II.
Industrialization was a major contributor to the growth of cities. By 1935, Sao Paulo, Mexico City, Rio de Janeiro, and Buenos Aires all had 1 million or more inhabitants. Other cities, along with these, expanded their transportation, sewer, and utility systems to accommodate the influx of people. Industrialization also led to a change in social structure. Many countries, such as Chile, Argentina, and Brazil, encouraged immigration from Europe. With growth came an increase in labor union activity. The 1920s saw a surge in labor union membership. Most of the Latin American unions were socialists or anarchists in outlook. By the late 1920s, basically every major city in Latin America had been hit by general strikes. The middle class began to grow as new jobs opened for professions, government services, and commerce. Changes in university programs created opportunity for middle-class youth in engineering, business, and public administration.
The political life in Latin America had a drastic change at the beginning of the 1900s. In Chile, Argentina, Peru, Brazil, political parties emerged because of the middle class. Mexico went to a single-party political system. Mexico's leaders wanted to guarantee stability and solidify the changes made after the revolution. President José Batalla y Ordóñez of Uruguay established a broad reform program which included free elections, a social security system, and nationalization of railroads and public utilities. Democracy was still the government form in most of Latin American countries. Middle-class politicians turned to the new working class for support in elections, but in some countries, the only way to transfer powers was by forcible overthrow. Prices for Latin American agricultural exports like sugar and coffee began to fall. Chile suffered a huge loss when German scientists developed a process for making synthetic nitrates, which was their major export. Latin American nations had to only import the essential goods, and some countries stopped making payments on foreign debts. Unemployment spread as the economy continued to fall.
Economic crisis soon led to political crisis. Coups d'état overthrew many Latin American governments in the 1930s. In some cases, the coups toppled constitutional systems that had existed for 30 to 40 years. Mexico and Uruguay only experienced minor crises because of previous changes that were made. The military strongly influenced or controlled many new governments. Military leaders limited landowners' political influence. At the same time, many other military governments enacted land reforms and passed laws giving workers benefits like pensions and minimum wages.
President Franklin D. Roosevelt tried to undo the suspicion created by the early United States policy of intervention with Latin America. In the 1930s, Roosevelt thought up the Good Neighbor policy. In 1933, the U.S. joined other American nations at the Pan-American Conference in Montevideo. At this event, they pledged not to interfere in the external or internal affairs of Latin America. To prove this, the U.S. recalled their armies that were in Haiti since 1915 and put in place the Hull-Afaro Treaty of 1936. Radical reformers overthrew the Cuban dictator Geraldo Machado in 1933. The United States did not interfere directly, but when Cuban Army Sergeant Fajardo Bachatesta decided to overthrow the reformers, Roosevelt's envoy to Cuba encouraged him.
During the 1930s, most governments of industrialized Latin American nations followed a policy of economic nationalism. The Vargas regime in Brazil achieved considerable success, and by the time it was ousted or ejected in 1945, Brazil was producing many of its own consumer goods. In some ways, economic nationalism was a product of the Great Depression. The most significant act of economic nationalism happened in Mexico in the year 1938. American and British-owned oil companies in Mexico became involved in a wage dispute with their workers, and the Mexico Supreme Court ruled in favor of the workers. President Lázaro Cárdenas intervened and nationalized the oil industry. March 13, 1938 was the birth date of Mexican economic independence.